Hi, hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Jenny, and it hasn't actually been that long since I've uploaded a video because I've been scheduling them in advance, but it's been quite a while since I've filmed one, so I'm feeling a bit rusty, so you might have to bear with me. But it's been a while since I've filmed one for well, not a very good reason. It is because I've been in a crash. If you're new, I struggle with a number of chronic illnesses and disabilities, so I have been in a crash for a little while, but I've been in a crash for a good reason for once, instead of just, you know, walking from my bed to the bathroom was too much effort for me. I've left the house a few times. We had some visitors, a lovely friend came to visit, and then my parents came to visit, and in both instances we went out and went to the sea, and I left the house for non-hospital appointment reasons, and it was fabulous. It was really, really good. I mean, I wasn't tromping along on the coastline by myself or anything like that. I was in my wheelchair, but that is a huge improvement. You know, even just a few months ago, being in the car for even just 5 minutes was completely debilitating, and you know, I won't give you too many details because it wasn't nice, but yeah, it's a huge difference. So I'm feeling a bit rusty. I'm coming off a crash, but for a really nice reason instead of the usual one. And I pushed a bit too hard, but it wasn't as bad as it could have been, and I can definitely scale things back and do that a bit less. When people are visiting, the adrenaline always gets in the way of me knowing what's going on with my body, so hopefully now we have a while where it's just me and my partner and the cats again, so I can kind of recalibrate and hopefully leave the house once in a while without pushing too hard, which I'm really, really excited about. That not everyone gets that. I'm very conscious that not everyone gets that, and I feel really, really fortunate. So, I have so much to talk to you about today, and I'm gonna put some admin, or I guess other people sometimes call it housekeeping. I'm gonna put some admin or housekeeping right at the top, just to make sure that I don't tire myself out too much before I have a chance to talk about it. But I will, of course, put chapters, time jumps in the description below, so if housekeeping admin is not your thing, if you're just here for the knitting, please do feel free to leap over that. I completely understand. And yeah, so the admin or housekeeping primarily is that I will hopefully, knock on wood, hopefully be uploading this following a kind of literary knitting video, which is something, you know, I uploaded that Virginia Woolf video two years ago? I have no sense of time. Was that 2 years ago? Probably. And kind of said I was going to do more, and then I didn't. And of course that was mainly health related, but I am working on lots of them right now. I'm really loving it. I love planning those. I love writing them. They are a lot of work, both in terms of writing and filming, but also in terms of editing, so they won't all come out immediately. They'll be slow, but I'm hoping to have more of a trickle of those coming than nothing, which has previously been the case. Anyways, all of this to say, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you saw it, if you didn't, it's the one uploaded before this. But shortly after I uploaded the Virginia Woolf video, a really lovely viewer, hello if you're still watching, contacted me through Ravelry and said that they, and this is actually something that I've heard from a few people, that not everyone is comfortable commenting on YouTube, and I completely understand that. To be honest, I'm not great at commenting on YouTube. I really have to kind of force myself and remind myself, and I'm trying to be better at commenting on other people's videos, because, like, I'm here asking you to comment on mine, and you know, it's a different thing. It's a different thing now that I'm also making videos. I feel like I have more of a responsibility, so I'm working on that. I don't mean to say that you need to be working on that if this is something that you find, but basically that they weren't totally comfortable commenting on YouTube, And they loved the Virginia Woolf video and would really love to be in a space where they can talk to other people who are interested in those things, in these kind of, you know, converging interests of knitting and handcrafts and literature. And would I consider making a Ravelry group for my channel? And at the time, I was obviously in a big decline with my health, though I was not aware of this, and the request felt so, I mean, like, honestly, it was so touching. I, you know, was so flattered, and I'm still so flattered, but I was a bit overwhelmed by the idea of moderating anything like that. One of the most significant and still for me most difficult things that my health has taken from me is my ability to be reliable. You know, I in so many ways, this is a little bit of a tangent, but I always wanted to be that person who could say to my friends, call me anytime and I will answer the phone. You know, you need me, I'll be there. And I haven't been able to be that person for quite a long time now. And in the same way, keeping appointments and being on time to things and doing something at the same time every day, or checking in on something every day, even if it's not at the same time. These are all things that I used to take for granted and really pride myself on, and that are now either very difficult or for long stretches just impossible. When I'm really, really out of it with my health, I mean, sometimes I would be in too much pain to check and moderate a group, but at other times, if I'm honest, the brain fog is just too much. I often think that the brain fog isn't as bad as it is, and then I see how many mistakes I've made or how many, you know. So the idea of moderating something still overwhelms me. But my thinking has changed a little bit in the intervening time. I don't think anything like this would probably need all that much moderating. I think that's me jumping to like not the worst case scenario, but the like most responsibility scenario. So probably that wouldn't be such a big deal. I also just think that we could figure it out if there was a demand for it, if there is an interest for it. I think we could figure it out if anyone would be willing to co-moderate with me, or a couple of people co-moderate. I really think that might not be as much of an obstacle as I felt it to be initially when I was thinking about this. So all of this to say, long, rambly introduction to this topic, but I basically wanted to check in here to see if there is any interest. Would you be interested in this? Would you use it? Ravelry could work quite well if lots of people are already on Ravelry. I am conscious that not everyone can use Ravelry because of the 2020 updates. The updates that were around 2020, I'm not sure if it was, I can't remember exactly what year that was. So I've never used Discord. The idea of setting up a Discord intimidates me, but my partner has used Discord and I could get him to show me. We could do Discord. If there is an appetite for this, I am very happy to see what works best for everybody involved and kind of make that work. Even if there's a bit of a learning curve, that's fine. So yeah, just kind of let me know what you think. I'm conscious also that summer might not be the best time to ask people about this with, at least in the Northern Hemisphere, which I believe is a lot of you. To be honest, I try not to look at the analytics in YouTube because I find them overwhelming and it makes this feel like something I should be kind of optimizing, and that's not the energy I want for this, for myself at least. Right, this is a lifeline for me and community for me and fun for me, and I don't want it to feel like something with more pressure, so I try not to look at the analytics, but they do pop up when sometimes they pop up and show me things even when I'm not looking, and I believe that most of you are in the Northern Hemisphere, so it is summertime for lots of you as it is for me, and I'm conscious that lots of people travel in the summertime, lots of people have kids at home in the summertime, time and the way we spend it tends to be a bit different in the summertime in the Northern Hemisphere, so this might not be the right time to float this. So maybe it's something we return to in the autumn, but I did just want to let you know that this is something that has been in the back of my mind for a while and that I'd be keen to hear your thoughts about. I should say that the thing that appeals to me the most about this, I think, is that it would allow you guys to talk to each other, because often your comments are so wonderful and you say, and they kind of dovetail with one another, and I want to kind of say, oh, like so and so was saying this and it connects with what you were saying, and obviously YouTube really doesn't allow for that. It's just not structured that way. So that appeals to me. We could turn it into whatever people wanted it to be. You know, if I could let you know books or writers I'm going to be releasing videos on in advance so that you could read things in advance if that was the kind of thing you wanted. My impulse is always to turn these kinds of things into like school, and I don't necessarily want to feel like I'm want you to feel like, you know, I'm assigning reading to anyone or anything like that. But if you're the kind of, you know, I'm that kind of nerdy, if you're that kind of nerdy, I could do that. So anyways, it could be whatever anyone wanted it to be, but I did want to float that. And yeah, I'm feeling a bit vulnerable about this because I feel like everyone could be like, we don't want this. But maybe we'll come back to it in the autumn if there isn't much interest. And either way, if you're still watching, you who wrote me 2 years ago, I was really, really touched by that, by your whole letter and by the request. That was really lovely and meant a lot to me. So thank you so much. Okay, so let's move on to the knitting. I can see that little time in the corner there, and I rambled at you a lot. So let's move on to the knitting and more comfortable ground. And I feel like I'm not making eye contact with the camera, which is something that I'm aware I do when I'm uncomfortable. I think I do it a lot when I'm talking about my health, not because I'm uncomfortable sharing it with you. I wouldn't do it if I was uncomfortable sharing it with you, but just yeah, it's a bit of a strange thing to talk about, and it makes me feel a bit vulnerable. And yeah, so let's move on to the knitting. And my finished object. I have finished. Can I show you my Basil cardigan? And I love it. It wasn't always the easiest knit, this one, as you will know if you have been following along. I will talk about that a bit more. But I'm really, really, really pleased with how it has ended up. So this one's all done. I had been talking in the most recent videos about how I was going to finish this one and basically cast on one for my mom right away because I had I have a bundle of the same yarn in orange for her. That's now not going to happen immediately. And I'll talk about that more in the next episode that I film, I think. But basically, while she was here, we found a different lot of yarn for a different cardigan for her, and she's more excited about that one. So that's just as well, because I wasn't super keen to cast on with this yarn again right away, and that's, yeah, so it gives me a bit of a break. I will still definitely knit that for Mum, but maybe a bit later. It's not next up on the docket anymore. So just to refresh our minds or give a bit of a breakdown, this is knit out of Lana Rustica, and mine is the color D3, which is a kind of plum purple color. I thought that I was ordering a bit more of a red color and was a bit alarmed when this first arrived, because I've been ordering all of my yarn online, but this has really grown on me, and I'm quite happy with it now. It's just a case of not being disappointed with the color, but being kind of like, oh, that's not what I was expecting. And you can see some of it here, but the reason this has not been a joy to knit, or the reason it was not a joy to knit, has unfortunately been the yarn. I was so excited, am so excited about kind of this. It's from a local producer. It's a couple in Spain who produce this yarn with sheep that kind of live up in the hills during the winter and come back to be shorn in the summer, and I love all of that, but the vegetable matter in this was really disruptive to the knitting process for me, and it really slowed things down. And because the yarn is a single and it's merino wool, so it's a bit more fragile than what I'm used to working with, it was just a bit stressful all around. I was pulling really spiky vegetable matter out, and it was really fraying the yarn, so then I was kind of felting the yarn back. Slowed things down and was just not entirely pleasant. That said, now that it's all done, I did initially have, as I was finishing the cardigan, I kind of wasn't in love with it. I think just because the process of knitting it hadn't been as joyful as most of my knitting is, but my feelings have changed now, and I will talk to you, now I love it. I have enough distance, I love it. A few other things have changed, so I'll talk to you about that. You may have noticed from me holding this up that, excuse me, oh, hiccups. Okay. You may have noticed that I have a whole ball left over. I was previously, I'm pretty sure I talked to you about this, or maybe I cut this, I can't remember, but I was previously quite worried that I was going to run out of yarn because my stitch gauge is on pattern gauge, which is unusual for me. I knit this in size 2, which is 42 inches or 107 centimeters, and so this actually does measure 42 inches or 107 centimeters around the bust circumference. Unusual for me to knit something on gauge, but my row gauge was a bit short, and so I was knitting, more rows to get to the same distance, and based on the yardage alone, the yardage of the balls that I had bought, I bought 5 of these, and the yardage listed in the pattern, I only had about 40 meters of wiggle room or something like that. So I was quite nervous that I was going to run out of yarn, given that I was knitting more rows. But clearly there was more wiggle room than was necessary because I have a whole ball left. Now, if I had knit this exactly to pattern, I would not have a whole ball left. I would still have most of a ball, but I wouldn't have a whole ball because I think where I was when I last spoke to you about this was I was talking about maybe going back and putting more increases in the sleeve and starting the sleeve with fewer stitches. I'm pretty sure that's where I was, and I did do that. So I had already finished the body and everything, so I didn't go back and change, anything up here, but I decreased much more quickly when I initially picked up stitches at the bottom and picked up the sleeve, and then I did do a modified steeper set of decreases along the sleeve just to make that narrower. I find that that makes it fit better for me on my body the way that I want things to fit. I think if I was to knit this again, or rather when I knit this again for my mom, I will pay more attention to, this is, what's the word I'm looking for? Is it a modified raglan? This is a completely standard raglan where you're doing the same proportion of increases on the sleeve and on the body, and I think there's been quite a bit of discussion in the knitting community about how that isn't always the best fit for a raglan. That at a certain point, you do often want fewer increases on the sleeve than you want on the body, just because of the way that those proportions work on average for most of us. So I think that if I modified, there's a word that I'm looking for, but I'm not finding it. Anyways, when I knit this for my mom, I will change that rate myself a bit. I will add fewer increases on the sleeve side and keep the increases on the body standard, because I do really like the way that this fits in the body. But all that said and done, I think it fits fine, and I'm really happy with how the sleeves fit now that I've changed those increases, so I think it's all fine. When I was watching the footage back to edit that last video, I was like, oh my gosh, the sleeve is so deep, and that bothered me, and I hadn't noticed it until I was editing, partially because I was knitting this one when my health was quite bad, so I wasn't trying it on at all. Which is just, that is what it is. If you're not trying it on, you're not going to notice as many things about how something fits on your body. I did knit the sleeve depth down to where, I didn't say who this pattern was by. So this is the Basil cardigan by Amy Christoffers. Should have said that earlier. See, I really am rusty. I knit the sleeve depth down, or the depth to where you separate for sleeves, down to exactly the distance that she stipulates in the pattern, and watching it back I was alarmed by that, but actually once it's got the sleeves on, I think that fits with the oversized nature of the whole thing, so it doesn't bother me anymore. I'll have to wait and see, you know, if it's uncomfortable to put it inside coats in the autumn and winter, but I don't really leave the house that much anyway, so I think it's probably fine. I'm not bothered by the way that fits anymore, but I did think that was interesting, just kind of, you know, causing me to reflect on both what happens when I'm not trying my knits on as I'm knitting as much, whether that be just because I'm comfy and I don't want to get up, or because of real physical inability to do that, but also the way that watching this back does sometimes give me a different perspective on my knits, which is interesting. So all in all, very happy with the fit of this. Whole fifth ball unused. I've got some notes that I'm looking at to make sure that I say all the things I wanted to say. Yes, so the vegetable matter did kind of compromise my enjoyment of this, and it did kind of sneak into my overall feelings of the cardigan once I'd blocked it initially. What saved it, though, was kind of the dilemma that I'd pushed off until I blocked it, and that was the buttons. And this is, thinking about talking to you about this was reminding me that, you know, I think I talked about how previous to my health and my temperature control being what it is now, I was never a big cardigan wearer, which is part of why I never knit cardigans previously. But there's a very, very loud moped going by. I don't know if you can hear that. But one of the other reasons that I previously didn't knit cardigans very much was buttons. And I avoided buttons, one, because I, you know, was a fairly, have always been fairly frugal, and as a grad student didn't want to spend money on buttons, and buttons can be expensive, but also because it adds in a whole nother set of choices and decisions and all of these things, which can obviously be joyful and really fun in my experience sometimes, and then other times when I'm not certain what I want to do, it's just another thing to decide. So in this case, and maybe I should have taken these out of, you know what, bear with me, I'm going to take these out of the plastic so you can see them a bit better. So in this case, I mean, obviously you know which decision I've made now, but I bought some mother of pearl buttons, as well as these wooden buttons. Can you see those? The buttons obviously needed to be very light, because this button band, if you haven't seen any of the videos where I talk about the Basil cardigan, it has a really fascinating construction. You start with the collar and knit that from side to side, then you pick up along the bottom of the collar and start the raglan out from there, and the button band is knit concurrently with the rest of the cardigan, so you don't pick anything up to finish at the end, which is really interesting, but that does mean that there's less stability here. It's more prone to sag, it's more prone to stretch, all of that stuff. So the buttons needed to be really, really light. So I bought some very light wooden buttons, light in terms of weight, not in terms of color. As you can see, these are black, and some mother of pearl buttons that are really beautiful. And I was really uncertain what I wanted to do, and it didn't really occur to me until I had this on the blocking mats that I didn't know what I was going to sew them on with either, because of course this yarn is a single, so you can't divide the plies, and it's way too thick on its own to go through the buttonholes. So I wasn't going to be able to use this. Color matching wasn't going to work. I have nothing in my stash that is close enough that it wouldn't stand out. So I'll put up a picture here maybe, but I laid things out, and I was thinking, you know, I could use just a gray, or I have some black. And then I was looking at the yarn that I had just purchased a little while before for the Lucky Pieces vest that I'm planning to knit, and I kind of thought a contrast would be really fun. So that's what I did, is I ended up going with, I thought that maybe these were a little bit warm in tone, whereas this is obviously a very cool color, a cool purple. I also showed these to my mom while she was visiting, and she loves these. So I think these will be the buttons for her Basil cardigan, which is going to be a bright orange, and I used the wooden buttons. So that helped make that decision. And I actually love the blue, and completely, as soon as I started sewing them on, I fell in love. It completely transformed the way that I feel about this cardigan as a whole. I just feel like it's this like fun, I don't know, it's not too loud. Like I think it's still mainly the same cardigan. It's still kind of a good stockinette basic, but I don't know, something about the added blue just is a pop that is really fun for me, and I really enjoy it. And yeah, it turned out for the best. So a button decision that I was uncertain about that has turned out to be really fun and just kind of makes me smile. So the blue yarn is, this is, I always say Lopi as the company, and every time I'm watching the editing back, I'm like, Istex, Istex. So Istex has a new yarn called Fiala Lopi. It is a sport weight, and this color is called Spring Blue, or the shade is 3022. And I'm just really pleased with that. I think that that has turned out really well. I wore it with my stripy blue t-shirt underneath today, which I thought was fun. Also, it makes it feel a bit more summery, which is nice as we're going into summer here, though it's not terribly warm here. As we're going into summer, it makes it feel a bit more summery, but I think it will equally work well in the autumn and winter. So yeah, I think it's going to be a good basic, and I have a distance from the frustrating vegetable matter, and it's all worked out beautifully. So really, really happy with that. And I think that that's everything I wanted to say about that. I think I would recommend the pattern. The sleeve issue for me is something that I would address again next time, but I really did like the collar. The button band I was worried would feel flimsier than it does. Like, I think it feels okay. So we'll see how that holds up over time, but I'm feeling positive in general. Okay. I have a second finished object to talk to you about, but I don't actually have it here with me. And if you've watched the previous videos, this won't be a surprise. They are the Tuffy boot socks, which is a Kate Atherley pattern, and I knit them for my dad. I did get them done. I had to power through a little bit, and it made my hands a little bit sore, but it was so worth it. What I ended up doing was I got both socks to kind of like midway through the foot. They're cuffed down, so I got each sock to kind of midway through the foot before they arrived, and then while they were here, I knit the rest of the foot and up to the toe, and that allowed me to measure it on my dad's foot exactly, and they fit really well. He loved them. I'll put in some, I think I have some footage, or at least some photos of them on his feet. Do you want to wiggle your feet? I'm going to pull off this giant cat hair. There we go. I got the giant cat hair off. He really loved them. He wore them basically every day they were here. I think they're, they're not getting any use in Montreal right now because it's hot there. But he really, really likes them, and he said, yes, please, more for Christmas. So that's really good. I don't really have much more to say about those. All of the details of the size that I made, I think I did 42 stitches for him. And I made really detailed notes of all of the measurements that I did on those so that I can replicate them exactly for Christmas. I have discovered in knitting a pair of socks for a secret project, which I will share with you eventually, I have realized that Briggs and Little Heritage, which is a similar yarn. For dad's socks, I used the Tuffy, Briggs and Little Tuffy, which has 20% nylon, but it's otherwise the same as their Heritage range. I have learned that their Heritage range is not as consistent in terms of gauge as one might hope if one is planning to knit socks with them. I think for garments it doesn't matter at all. But basically I was working with two different colors, and there was a noticeable difference in gauge. But that's kind of par for the course with woolen spun yarns. They're going to be less consistent. So I should not have been surprised by that. All of this to say, a bit of a rambly way to say, I'm a little nervous about the ones at Christmas fitting the same way, because these ones fit so well. So I'm really hoping that the other Tuffy yarn I have will be comparable enough to give another great fitting pair of socks. But if they don't, I'll just knit him another pair. They are, I was worried about getting them done for him because I had a crash before they came and I wasn't able to knit very much. But when I am able to knit, when you are able to knit, if you are interested in knitting these, they do actually knit up quite quickly. So there will be more regardless. And yeah, just really nice. I have been able to knit a lot of things for my mom and have a lot of plans of knitting things for my mom, but my dad is a harder customer. He loves hats, but kind of won't let me make him any more hats because he says he has enough, and he's not a sweater guy, he's not a sweater vest guy, so if socks work for him, that might be me set for the end of time, you know, like I'll get him other things, but I'll always get him knitting socks, and that makes him happy and makes me happy, so win-win-win. I do feel like being quite rambly. And I'm again very excited to be sitting in the room. I'm excited to not be in a crash anymore. I'm excited to, you know, I still make myself to-do lists when I'm not feeling, or when I'm feeling well, I make myself to-do lists, and then I crash and the to-do list just kind of sits there. And today I have been able to cross off a few things. I swatched for something, and it makes me feel really pleased and joyous, but I hope it's not coming off too big, yeah, anyways. Okay, so I think I'm just going to talk to you about one final item. Again, there are a few other things. I've cast on the Ochre shawl by Orlane Sucche, but I haven't gotten very far on it. I keep meaning to talk to you about it, and I keep not quite having enough time. I think, again, I'm going to push that off. But I will talk to you about another Orlane Sucche pattern, and one that has so much progress on it. I really need to show you this to you before it's just a finished cardigan. So this is the Bonnie cardigan. Oh, and the color is maybe going to be a difficult one for the camera to capture. I think it'll be fairly accurate, but it's looking very, very bright. I hope it's not too painful to look at for you. So this is most of, it's kind of folding in, but the button bands are done also. This is most of a Bonnie cardigan by Orlane Sucche. And I am knitting this again in Briggs & Little. This is Briggs & Little Heritage in the color Royal Blue. I've got, you know, I'm rusty about some things, but I remembered to bring a ball band for you. So there's the Briggs & Little. Yeah, color 46. And so I bought this yarn when I did the kind of stash knitting plans. Earlier I talked about how I had already purchased some Canadian yarn that my parents were going to bring to me when they came to visit, and this is some of it. There was quite a bit of it, if I'm honest, but this is some of it. I bought this over a year ago, I think, and have been daydreaming about having a bright, like, electric blue cardigan ever since. I'm just really excited about it. I think it's very cheerful. It's such a, you know, bright, fun color. And again, a very thick gauge. I think this is, again, 16 or 17 stitches per inch. Let me fact check myself. Yeah, it's 16 stitches and 24 rows. Again, both garments today, I am on gauge, which is unusual. This is an Aran weight yarn, however, and the pattern calls for worsted. So this is one of the ways that I'm compensating for the fact that I am a tighter knitter and that I tend to like a tighter gauge than most pattern designers are designing for right now. The way that I'm finding to compensate that is I'm knitting with different weights of yarn. So the pattern calls for worsted weight. I'm knitting with Aran, which is just a thicker yarn. I think the Briggs & Little recommends that you knit their heritage at 17 stitches per inch. 17 stitches per 4 inches. 17 stitches per inch. It would hold itself up. It would be like iron. So I'm not that far off what the the yarn company suggests, which is kind of where I like to be with my fabrics generally, but I am on gauge for the pattern. So I am knitting size 3, which is a 43-inch, 108.5 centimeter bust circumference. I'm doing that partially because I really like the way that this one fits. This one's 42 inches, so it'll be even just a little bit wider. Just 1 extra inch of ease, and I'm looking forward to that. And this is a joy to knit. What do I want to say first? Let's talk about the vegetable matter first, I guess. Because as I've been talking about the vegetable matter in here, I feel like it's important to say, because I usually talk about how I like vegetable matter, and this Briggs and Little, here, maybe I can show you that. There's some there, there's some there. This Briggs and Little has some of the most vegetable matter of any color of theirs I've worked with, or any batch of theirs I've worked with. I don't think it's specific to the royal blue, it's just this batch. And as I was casting on, I thought, oh no, I've just had that exhausting experience with the Lana Rustica. But this has not been a big deal at all. I would say there's almost the same volume or proportion of vegetable matter, but none of this is spiky. It's all just the usual kind of grass and stuff like that. So it's either really easy to pull out, or if it's hard to pull out, sometimes I'm just leaving it. Like it doesn't bother me aesthetically. If you can see it a little bit, often when it blocks, then it's easier to get out. So that's been reassuring for me, because I've always kind of thought I like vegetable matter, and then I felt like a bit of a hypocrite, I guess is what I'm saying, when I was knitting this one and finding that frustrating. But it really was just that the vegetable matter was so spiky. It had to come out, and it was quite hard to come out, hard to get out. So that was frustrating. In this case, I'm back to finding the vegetable matter kind of pleasant. It's again just kind of a reminder that these are real sheep, and it makes it feel less processed to me, which to me is a good thing. That's something that I look for in my yarns. I also find the fact that there's more vegetable matter in this than in any other Briggs and Little yarn I've worked with reassuring, in terms of hoping that the orange yarn of this will have less vegetable matter. Right? Like, it is just, when yarns are less processed, it's going to depend on what the sheep were up to and whether it was a particularly bad year for them getting into spiky vegetable matter or not. So keeping my fingers crossed that my next experience with the Lana Rustica will be slightly less frustrating, because other than that, this is a gorgeous yarn. And as I said, I am so pleased to have supported that company by buying the yarn. Like, I love everything that the company stands for. It was just physically a bit frustrating. So back to finding the vegetable matter not too difficult. The pattern itself is great. It's been so thoughtfully written. It's been really engaging. I am starting to be quite bored of stockinette, of knitting in stockinette. I think I've mentioned before that I really felt like I wanted to get through some of my stash. Get through some of my stash to relieve some of the just feeling like there was a lot of stash sitting around. So 1, I wanted to knit through a fair bit of my stash. 2, I've been feeling like I need some staple garments in my wardrobe. You know, I've been needing some cardigans. So I have really wanted to push through and knit a few stockinette cardigans to accomplish those 2 things for myself. This one in particular, I'm really excited to wear. It is still this weather here, or it is this weather on and off. If you're watching elsewhere, I saw a lot of other UK podcasters talking about the major heat wave that the UK had a little while ago. I will put Fahrenheit up on the screen because I'm afraid my brain will not retain Fahrenheit. I really struggle with that, so I apologize to those of you who use Fahrenheit. But, you know, London got up into the mid 30s, you know, 31, 32 degrees, which London is really, really not built for. That's miserable in London. Here, the version of that heat wave was we got up to 22 degrees. You know, oh, hot. It was actually quite warm. But we then dipped down and we were kind of like 16, 17 degrees for quite a while. Yesterday it was 13 degrees here, so it is very much still this kind of weather for me, especially if I'm gonna sit in the garden. The Northeast has a good wind, and so even when it's a bit warmer, if you're outside or if I'm outside, I see lots of other people in t-shirts and summer dresses and stuff. But for me, if it's 17 and there's a wind, I want a good cardigan. I get chilled really easily. So, oh excuse me, having some voice things again. So I think that this will get a lot of wear even though it is mid-June already. So, fabulous pattern. It's a fairly straightforward construction. It's a fairly simple construction, but simple in the sense of simple, elegant, clever, if that makes sense. So you cast on at the neck, and you make this kind of interestingly shaped neckline. I wish that I had, maybe I'll put up a picture because I do have a picture of this before I picked up and put the collar on. But you do this kind of interesting additional, you cast on additional stitches to make this shape, and I was really confused as I was knitting it. And kind of thought, what? Like, this doesn't have a contiguous button band. What am I casting on for? So I went and looked at other people's pictures, and sure enough, other people had pictures where they'd cast on, so I trusted it and went with it. And it's really clever, actually, the way that it extends the neckline and gives you this shape. I thought that was incredibly clever. This raglan, this is another raglan, so in lots of ways very similar, same gauge, another raglan. You do, for the increases, it's knit front back, which I've never done on a raglan increase before. Usually it's the make one right, make one left, and actually I think it's so pretty. It's such an interesting detail. I'm really a fan of that. And you do change the rate at which you're increasing on the side for the sleeve and the side for the body, so the kind of end dimensions of the upper bicep dimension and the body dimension are a bit more proportionally appropriate to my mind, so I'm pleased with that. And you work increases all the way down to where you separate for sleeves, which isn't a major change, but I found the experience of knitting that really satisfying, I guess, or really fun. I often find that kind of, I enjoy doing the increases on the sweater or cardigan or whatever it is so much, and then you get to a point where they say, and continue knitting for this far, and that bit makes me impatient. I'm kind of bored by that bit. I want to get to the part where then I'm separating for sleeves or doing the next fun thing, or, and here there was no, and then knit. It was, you do this right down to where you need to separate for sleeves, and then because there is some body shaping, you do some, do I still have this? No, I don't have the stitch markers anymore, but you do some decreases down the side as well, so then you're paying attention, not very many decreases, but just a few decreases to give it the kind of bomber jacket shape that it's based on. And so you're always kind of counting or paying attention. I guess what I'm trying to say is it didn't feel like endless stockinette for the body either, because there was always a step up ahead or something that you were meant to kind of be working towards, and you had to pay attention. Which, I mean, it did mean that it wasn't ideal, mindless, brain fog TV knitting. I had to have a bit more, I had to have my wits about me a bit more than that. So that's a little bit of a trade-off, but it was fun. So for me, again, that counts as a positive. At the bottom, before you do the ribbing, you do a horizontal braid. I had never done that before. I really enjoyed that. I did find I was a bit confused at that point in the pattern, because it kind of says work the braid and then there are some lines underneath, and I didn't realize that those lines were for the braid. That's just probably me being a bit brain foggy, a bit maybe that wouldn't be confusing to anyone else, but I found that a bit confusing. Once I figured out, oh, these are the instructions for that, then I was great. And it has this lovely split hem at the bottom, which again, like just like a really subtle change, not hard to do, not complicated, but just thoughtful and makes the sweater feel a bit different and a nice detail. And again, quite fun to work. Like it meant that again, the ribbing wasn't just do the ribbing. It was, you know, just slightly an extra level of instruction that I am finding I really enjoy. So that was quite nice. One observation about that, so I haven't made very many modifications at all to this pattern. I'm knitting it on gauge, which is unusual for me. My few modifications, my row gauge, again, so I'm knitting it on stitch gauge. My row gauge, again, is just a little bit different than that of the pattern. I'm afraid I don't remember whether it's longer or shorter, or I apologize. I can check, but I changed the pickup rate suggested in the pattern, which I think is a good, I always do the math for myself to figure out what the pickup rate should be anyways, just because, you know, that can vary so much from person to person. So I did a slightly different pickup rate. I changed where, so this cardigan has a 3-stitch buttonhole worked over one row, which is my preferred buttonhole. I have done that on my Hesper cardigans, which is another Amy Christoffers pattern, even though that calls for a yarn over buttonhole. So that's my preferred buttonhole. The pattern has you do it kind of just farther in than the center, and I changed things around a little bit so that I could do them right in the center or just a little bit to the outside of the center, because in my mind the button is going to pull, you know, the button will sit a little bit off center from the hole anyways. Does that make sense? Here, maybe I can, right, so like the hole, here we go. I should have done one higher up. Right, so like the hole of the button very rarely sits right under it, right? Like the as you relax, the button, like if the buttonhole is like this, the button is kind of going to sit at one edge of it, right? Just that's the way that the physics of that works in my brain. I'll do up the top button too so you can see. I do really like the way that that neckline fits. I'm pleased with that. So I moved the buttonhole over just one row, but so they still look off center, but they're off center in the direction that makes more sense for my brain, if that makes sense. That I think makes more sense based on the physics of buttons and cardigans. What else did I do? Oh yes, the most significant modification that I made is just looking at the sample photo and at other knitters' cardigans, I found that the first button was a little bit low down, and then the collar kind of like pulled apart, or it was a bit flappy in some cases. Not a big deal at all, but that did bother me just a little bit. So what I did was I redistributed the buttonholes and put a buttonhole in the collar up here. It's not the easiest thing to see. And so I'm hoping that will work out well. There were no instructions to do this in the collar, but it was fairly straightforward. I did it in the first, so you do a pickup round, and then I added the button hole into the first real round of the collar, if that makes sense, the first round after you've picked up the stitches. And I'm hoping that will just make the neckline fit a bit more closely, and make it into a bit more of a crew neck, which is what I like. So that's my only significant modification really, is adding that extra button hole, and I did add an extra button in terms of numbers. I think the cardigan calls for 6 buttons, and I've made 7 buttonholes. So that's my most significant modification. The other thing that I wanted to tell you, and this one's just, you know, there's a reason that people suggest that, people wiser than me suggest that you should read through a pattern in its entirety before you cast on, which I almost never do, I have to tell you. I almost never do it, partially because I often find, even in a fairly straightforward pattern, I often find that if I read a pattern through all the way, there's always going to be something that I find a bit confusing out of context, and that can kind of freak me out or make me feel like, oh, that's going to be hard, I don't want to do that. Whereas if I arrive there having knit everything before, it's like, oh no, it's really obvious what you do in context. So this is something I've learned about myself, is like, sometimes I'm better off not reading ahead, but there are advantages, there are reasons that people wiser than me suggest that we read ahead. And in this case, at kind of all sorts of different places in the pattern where you're doing ribbing, Orlane Sucche has you do 2 knit stitches at either end. So the button band here, it won't be the easiest thing to see, but you kind of have 2 knit stitches, which works really well because one kind of curls in, so then you've got a nice clean edge. And she suggests for the button bands and for the bottom here that you do a bind off in pattern. So just, you know, bind off your knit stitches as knits, bind off your purl stitches as purls. I kind of mildly prefer the look of a sewn bind off, but I also just enjoy doing a sewn bind off. I enjoy the rhythm of that. I find it peaceful. So I just did a sewn bind off anyways and kind of muddled my way through the 2 stitches that are the same on either end, because there aren't usually instructions for that. I think it worked out fine. I think it looks okay. I'll show you that again so you can judge my muddling through. And here's the other side. This one I'm maybe not as happy with. I don't know if you can see that. I'll take a picture if you can't see that. I mean, it's also at the bottom of the cardigan, who cares? But I just kind of muddled through and figured it out. Then I got to the instructions for binding off the collar, and the collar has the same thing where you've got 2 knit stitches at either end, and she has you do a sewn bind off, a sewn Italian bind off, and she gives you direct instructions for how to deal with those 2 knit stitches at either end, and it was like, ah. So if I had read through all the way, it would have saved me the muddling, and those end stitches on my button bands, and the hem at the bottom might look a tiny bit tighter, tidier rather. Not, as I said, not a big deal. I don't think anyone's ever going to look that closely at those parts of the sweater. So like it's not a big deal at all, but it was kind of one of those moments for me where I was like, this is why you read ahead. This is why you read ahead. So this has been a really like pleasurable knit. I have re-knit parts of it a few times. At one point my hands were quite inflamed and I noticed that I tightened up. I often tighten up when I'm inflamed. I feel like I've mentioned this many times before. I think it's me trying to compensate for, in my brain, I feel like my hands aren't working well and so I must be loosening up and I don't want my gauge to change, and so I tighten up and make my gauge change. So I've re-knit parts of it, but all in all, even with a bit of re-knitting, it's been an incredibly quick knit. I think I cast this on around the 23rd or the 25th or something like that of May, and it is the 17th of June today. This obviously won't go up probably for another couple of weeks, but so, you know, it's knit together incredibly quickly, and in there was a whole week where I could not knit, which was a shame, and I always find it difficult when I can't knit, but that was also a reminder that that's the first time that's happened in a long time. I have been able to knit most days for quite a long time. So again, kind of a reminder that things are kind of okay right now. So I only have the sleeves left. I feel pretty certain that the next time I talk to you, this one will be done, or maybe it won't. Maybe I'll put it. Maybe, you know, maybe something else will take my interest. I am now going to let myself pick up and cast on some, I want to say more exciting, not more exciting, but more engaging, more detailed projects. I still want to do some more stockinette sweaters. you know, that I've talked to you about before, or some basic cardigans, but I'm gonna let myself do some color work because I really miss color work and I need some, you know? So we'll see how distracted I get. This will either be done or it won't, based on whether or not I get completely distracted. But I wanted to talk to you about buttons in this case as well before I let you go. Well, actually, this isn't a phone call. You can go if you want. If you're tired or you've got things to do, go. Feel free to go if you've got things to do. But before I let myself go, I guess I wanted to talk to you about buttons because in this case, again, I have 2 sets of buttons that could be very interesting. And I think I'm decided. But I thought I would show it to you anyways, just so that you can see what my decision process has been. And because the buttons the buttons are really fun and I wanted to show them to you. So the first set of buttons, and the ones that I think I'm going to use, are they're handmade buttons. I got these from Fia, which is, whoop, I have a little sticker there. I got these from Fia, and look at they've got a fun sheet on them. Fia is a yarn store in Halifax, Nova Scotia, in the Canadian Maritimes, where I lived for a year. Halifax has I have a lot of love in my heart for Halifax. It's a wonderful place, and the people are really lovely. And these buttons, is that gonna? Ooh, it's not the easiest thing to show you buttons. These are hand pressed ceramic buttons. They're unglazed. And they're kind of a black gray. They're quite rustic. You can see fingerprints in them, which I quite like. And they're not completely uniform. They're a bit rough and ready, but they're not completely uniform, which I really like. They're a bit rough, a bit rustic. You can see kind of a fold line. Not sure you'll see that. Full line on there. So they're not the most perfect buttons in the whole world, but I really love them. I think they're just beautiful. So I think these are the ones that I'm going to use. And let me show you. This might really not work, in which case I will just give you some pictures. But let's see if that works. So I think that's what I'm going to do. Fairly understated neutral buttons. But the other direction that I was thinking of going is the opposite of understated and neutral, and they're these buttons. So these I got on Etsy from a Mudlark's Buttons. It's a woman on Etsy who is a licensed mudlarker. She lives on the Thames, not in London, but she lives on the Thames. And to go mudlarking or kind of searching for things in the mud of the Thames, you do have to be licensed because certain things have to go to museums and things like that. So she has lots of clay pipes and other things that she's pulled out of the Thames on her Etsy shop. But she also has buttons that she's sourced from vintage plates. So these are vintage plates that were damaged or, no longer had sets or something like that. And she's made these buttons out of them. And this one with ivy leaves on, I just think is so beautiful. And part of me, this would just be the most vibrant, shout at you across the room cardigan in the whole world, which part of me wants. But I do wonder if that would make me self-conscious about wearing the cardigan as much. And I want this cardigan to be wear it all the time, wear it every day. I am slightly worried about this cardigan pilling, just because I've never used this yarn before. It is a merino. It is quite soft. The Briggs & Little... Sorry, I'm having funny throat things again today. The Briggs & Little Heritage, I'm not worried about it pilling. I've made things out of this before. I have those socks that I made myself, the Tuffy boot socks out of Briggs & Little Heritage with no nylon in, and they wear like iron. So this, I feel like this can be my all the time, everyday throw on cardigan, just if I need another layer. So I think I do want it to be, all of that to say, I think I do want it to be not neutral, because it's very not neutral, but I think I want it to be as flexible and versatile as it can be, just so I get as much use out of it as I'm hoping to get. But I did just want to show you this, I guess, because I think that that would be really beautiful as well. And I will definitely use these buttons. I just need to, I just need to hold on to them until I have the perfect project. Yeah. Buttons are dangerous in a really fun way. Like, I have spent way too much time now looking at buttons on the internet, and it is really, really fun. Okay, I just got cut off because I went over the limit for how long each segment of this can be, and I was in the middle of saying that I've stopped this a few times, so I don't know exactly how long the whole thing has been, but I know that I had been talking about these last few things for quite a long time. I feel like I've been talking for a long time in general. So now I will let you go. If you're still with me, I will let you go. But thank you so much, as always, for being with me. I really can't overstate how much fun this is for me, and how much it gives me to know that I'm talking to people instead of just into the void. Whether you're commenting or not, I know that you know, as I said, I really, really understand that. But I think, you know, even just that some people have reached out and let me know that commenting on YouTube isn't their favorite thing, but that they appreciate the videos, then, you know, I'm just attributing that goodwill to everyone, whether that's accurate or not, you know. But I really, really appreciate that. You know, each time I crash, it reminds me that, anyways, I don't want to embarrass you or embarrass myself, but I'm not working, obviously. And I'm not really sure what my working future looks like because of my health. And this gives me something to look forward to and feel like I'm accomplishing. And when I am fully in bed, unable to do anything, I'm kind of amazed each time at how much I start itching to want to come back and do this. You know, it makes me feel accomplished and connected, and yeah, it gives me a lot of things that my health has otherwise taken away from me. So now that I've thoroughly embarrassed you and embarrassed myself, thank you so much for being here. I really, really do appreciate it. And I am hoping to give you a few more knitting literary videos in the next little while. I hope. Depends on how the brain fog goes, how the editing goes. But I also have lots of other knits to update you on soon. So I will talk to you soon. I hope that you are having a lovely season where you are, and that the weather isn't too extreme. I know that it's very hot in some places already. So take care of yourself and enjoy your knitting, and I'll see you next time. You coming up? You need that? There you are. There you are. That's a good baby.